So EPR for packaging and paper, which is also better called the Packaging Costs and Waste Reduction Act, thanks to Sydney Jordan, passed the Minnesota legislature in 2024, thanks to a lot of work by advocates in this room, and thank you to the leadership of Representative Jordan, who's with us today. So it's really in the early stages of implementation right now, but the law acts like other product stewardship programs. But in this case, it's for paper and it's for packaging. So producers will pay fees for the packaging and the single-use products that they sell into the state. And the fees are based on the amount of packaging that they're selling into the state and the type of packaging. So the less of it and the more reusable or recyclable, the less the producers pay. And these fees are used to cover the costs of the program, which include curbside recycling for everybody in Minnesota, expanded access to compost collection for all residents. And one of the biggest pieces of the program that's really going to drive change is that by 2032, as Leader Long mentioned this morning, all packaging that's sold into the state has to be reusable, recyclable, or compostable, which is just a huge, huge win. Thank you. The other big cornerstone of this program is that the producers have to meet requirements that are part of the zero waste hierarchy. So producers collectively are going to have to meet a certain percentage. They're going to have to reduce a certain percentage of their overall packaging that they're using in the state of Minnesota. They're also going to have to meet reuse rates and refill rates. Now, this is the first time the state has ever had any type of reuse, reduction, or refill mandate on industry ever. Hello? Do you guys hear me? I'm like, it's also going to have a recycling rate, a composting rate, and a post-consumer recycled content rate requirement. So with all of that, it is my pleasure and honor to recognize the work of Representative Jordan. So this law would not be a reality without the vision and perseverance of its author. Representative Jordan worked tirelessly to get this past the finish line, keeping communities and the environment at the center, even when the path was difficult. She fought for policies that don't just manage waste at the end of the line, but actually require producers to take responsibility up front, reducing waste before it reaches the shelves, before we are extracting resources from the ground. And passing this law wasn't easy. There was intense opposition, competing interests, and tough decisions to navigate. And through it all, Representative Jordan demonstrated resilience, patience, and an ability to bring people together around a shared vision. A vision of a cleaner, healthier, and more sustainable Minnesota. And in the short time that I've worked with Representative Jordan, what stands out most is how much she genuinely cares about the health of her community. She's thoughtful, smart, and persistent, and that combination made all the difference in getting this law across the finish line. Because of her leadership, Minnesota now has a framework that pushes producers to innovate and to rethink the design of their products. Sydney's leadership is an example of what can happen when our policymakers commit to bold action and refuse to settle for the status quo. And it's why, on behalf of all of us in the Minnesota Zero Waste Coalition, it's my honor to present Representative Sydney Jordan with the Minnesota Zero Waste Leadership Award in recognition for her leadership in advancing policies that reduce waste, expand reuse, and champion environmental justice. So help me welcome Representative Sydney Jordan. I just want to add that there was a lot of drama around what we were going to be giving her. So we are giving her this certificate, but we are also finishing up discussions with the Minneapolis PAC district, the park board, to finalize a plaque that is going to be placed on a recycling bin in either Logan Park or Northeast Park in your district. But you can have this in the meantime. So there you go.
I'm so overwhelmed. The fact that there could be a recycling bin in my park next to my house is, one of the coolest things I think I've ever heard. Then that whales navigate by the stars. I'm going to be thinking about that a lot, because I have not seen Star Trek. So,
Watch it.
okay, good to know. Well, thank you everyone for being here. As Lucy mentioned, my name is Sydney Jordan. I'm a Minnesota State Representative, and I represent Northeast Minneapolis and Southeast Como in the House, and I use she, her pronouns. I am in my 4th term, and I am the DFL co-chair for the Education Policy Committee, but I also serve on the Natural Resources Committee, which is where we talk about waste management in this state. And I'm here today for the same reason that you're all here today, which is that I believe a better world is possible. We don't have to accept the world we live in with single-use plastics, where we pay for corporations' waste, and where people die because they live in an unclean environment. And so, we talked about what a wonky name this bill has, the Packaging Waste and Cost Reduction Act, and we talk about EPR and acronym this and PRO and Advisory Council and all of all those weird government jargon, things that you would normally hear in like a sleep story. I don't know if anyone else listens to those stories to fall asleep. It sounds like the rules of cricket, right? But there's the reason why I care about zero waste is because of the HERC. I think this is a hometown crowd, so most of you know about the HERC, which stands for Hennepin Energy Recovery Center, which could mean anything, really. But what it really means is that's the place where we burn our trash in Minneapolis. And when we burn that trash, and it is we because it's owned by residents of Hennepin County, we own that. It's a Hennepin County facility. That trash is burned, and then it flows all across North Minneapolis and Northeast Minneapolis, where residents of North and Northeast have the highest rates of asthma in the entire state of Minnesota. And I'm one of those people who has asthma. And if you have asthma, it's pretty scary. You literally can't breathe. You cough. It's very similar to having a panic attack or a heart attack where you cannot breathe. You struggle. And before the pandemic, asthma and upper respiratory related illnesses were the #1 reason why kids in Minneapolis public schools missed school. So not only is this just an uncomfortable and deadly illness, it impacts every aspect of your life when you have asthma. It means that you can't go to school, you can't go to work, you can't breathe. And it's not just the HERC. We talked about Cancer Alley, but we have our own Cancer Alley in Minnesota, and it is along the Mississippi River, and it's in North Minneapolis, which is one of our poorest and most racially diverse parts of our city, where we also have the worst health outcomes. And so my constituents wanted to close the HERC. I've wanted to close the HERC since I was a student at the University of Minnesota, and the simple reason why Hennepin County says we can't close the HERC is because there's too much trash, and there's nowhere else for it to go. So that means we need less trash to burn. You can't burn trash if there's no trash, right? And plastic, plastic wasn't necessarily on my radar. A few years ago, I don't know that it was on all of our radar. When I was a student at the University of Minnesota, we kept talking about food. Food Inc. had just come out, and so everyone was talking about how to reclaim our food systems, which is great. We should absolutely do that, and that is also part of it. But plastic has really emerged as a dominant public health concern, and I hear about it everywhere I go. We've talked a lot about the public health aspects of that, and to be clear, people who live in poverty, people who live in other areas of poor public health are more likely to have plastic in their bodies. But also, it's even in areas where people don't live. So I think in Minnesota here, we're all familiar with the Boundary Waters, you know, that magical place where there's no roads, no one lives there. It's wilderness, it's pure wilderness. It's over 1 million acres of wilderness, so it's not like it's just a little like couple square blocks like a public park. But even in the Boundary Waters on Lake Kekakabik, which if you're a Boundary Waters user like I am, is several portages deep into the Boundary Waters. So this isn't, you know, Burnside or one of those access lakes. This is deep in the Boundary Waters. University of Wisconsin researchers did an earthworm study and found microplastics in earthworms in the middle of the Boundary Waters. And those plastics are not part of Boundary Waters ecosystem. There's, you know, those plastics are there because there is so much plastic in our environment that they have made their way into the earthworms' bodies in the middle of the Boundary Waters. And that's wrong. It's wrong for those plastics to be in my body in Northeast Minneapolis. It's wrong for those plastics to be in earthworms' bodies in the Boundary Waters. It's wrong for plastics to be killing people in Louisiana, and it's wrong for contamination to be killing people all over the world. But we can do that by eliminating the use of those plastics and holding corporations accountable for that waste. We've talked about this. We actually don't have choice in our packaging. I mean, yes, if you have the time, the energy, the money, the ability to go somewhere where you can actually access this, you can do your best to eliminate your dependence on single-use plastics. But let's be real, when I go and buy laundry detergent on my income as a state representative, I don't have choices in, you know, I have lots of choices in what kind of smell I want my clothes to smell like, if I want the pods, if I want the little sheets, if I want flakes, if I want liquid laundry detergent, but I don't actually have a choice in what packaging my laundry detergent comes in. I don't, and neither do you. And, you know, we can do what we can to reduce that and encourage that, but for all of us, we don't have the ability to opt out of plastic in our lives. And so, but the people who do are the people who design that packaging and sell it to you, and currently have well, not anymore, and who before we passed this law had no stake in that. But now we're holding them accountable, and these corporations will be paying for that and be forced, gently, to have packaging that is 100% recyclable, compostable, and most excitingly, reusable by 2032. And that's 40% of our waste. So while we're working on that, that means that we also have to deal with the other 60% of our waste. And there are solutions to this. It's not just packaging, even though that is projected to grow. We know that there's so many policies that people in this room are already thinking up. I've heard from several of you about, sure, we did EPR for packaging, but we need to work on mattresses. We need to work on carpeting. Our e-waste EPR desperately needs an overhaul. And part of that is our batteries. We need to do more to make sure that we're doing bottle deposits and bottle returns so we can get that aluminum and glass. And we need to make sure that we're banning more toxics that are part of packaging and part of plastics that are in our lives. We must do that. The other thing that is absolutely critical that we all do this next year, and these next 3 years under Donald Trump's administration, is defend what we've done. It's great to celebrate these wins, but these are under attack. There were bills introduced by my colleagues in the Minnesota House of Representatives to repeal aspects of this EPR and to not hold large producers like paper accountable for their waste. We have to defend. And as part of that, that also means defending our neighbors to make sure that they're part of that future that we all believe is better, defending trans people and the LGBTQ community, and making sure that this is a community that welcomes all people and provides for their future. I want to end by talking about all the people who need to share in this award. Two of them that come to mind are Speaker Melissa Hortman and Senate Majority Leader Carrie Dietzick, both of whom died this year, were important mentors of mine. Carrie Dietzick represented her hometown of Northeast Minneapolis in the University of Minnesota and Cedar Riverside. She was the original Senate author of EPR for packaging. And she passed away after a long battle with cancer at the beginning of this year. We know that many, we can't say definitively what caused anyone's cancer, but we know that living in the northern portion of Minneapolis has a higher correlation of people with cancer. And Carrie gave her life. This isn't even, she spent every moment of her life serving her community. And she cared a lot about this. She had asthma. She knew what we were doing. She was in this fight, and she deserves to share in this award. And another person who absolutely deserves to share in this award is Speaker Melissa Hortman. She is somebody who used to carry the bottle deposit return bill, and always saw the need to hold corporations accountable for this and make sure that we're getting these materials back so they don't end up in our landfill. She was our speaker in 2024 and helped make sure that we could negotiate to make sure that this bill became law. And she was murdered for what she believed in earlier this year. And she died for what she believed in, and that included recycling. And many of my colleagues need your support to feel brave because we were all targeted, but Melissa Hortman gave her life for the state of Minnesota and for that better world that we all believe is possible. And she deserves to be acknowledged for that as well. And lastly, this bill wouldn't have happened without so many people in this room. I'm just looking around and seeing people who were early in the creation of EPR for packaging, who stepped up along the way and reminded me and reminded so many other politicians that it's about the people, not corporations, and making life easier for corporations, but making life better for all of you. And so all of you deserve to share in this award. You're all part of Carrie Dietzick and Melissa Hortman's legacy. And everything that you do is part of that legacy too. So even if you didn't know Carrie or Melissa, even if you don't know who I am or anyone else today, by coming to Zero Waste Fest, by engaging with organizations, by organizing for a better future for yourself and your neighbors, you're part of that legacy. You're part of Frank Hornstein's legacy. You're part of Jamie Long's legacy, but you're especially part of Melissa and Carrie. And I just want to thank all of you for this. You also all deserve an award today for being here. So thank you so much. It means a lot to me. And thank you.